So let me ask you this question. Let's dig into a little bit of data, right? When you start talking about future characteristics of a market, what factors do you bring in to reach a conclusion or to give a recommendation? I've always wondered that. Like, how do you, we're sitting here right now in May of 2022.
Yeah.
What are you using to talk about 2023 and 2024? Because you said earlier you predicted that there was going to be a boom and then a decline.
So the key is what you're trying to predict, right? I take it from a standpoint of I'm not trying to predict the value of a card. I'm trying to predict how much we have to buy into it.
Okay.
And now just that we're in a hobby where like valuation is the latest comp. So that's why it'll look like, hey, wow, he's accurately predicting values of cards. I'm predicting us. And there is not only the sales data you can feed with, right? And you'll get like a range that you might be off, but I bring into qualitative data. So I have an analysis out there and it's on my website. So free, anyone can access it. It looks at what's the driving values of PSA 10 cost
Mm-hmm.
value of Pokemon cards. Because grading was new to Pokemon for the majority of the collectors going into 2020.
Okay.
So I bring in, hey, the price of a PSA 9, price of a raw card, looking at the averages over 90 days. And then I also bring in qualitative data. What I mean by qualitative data is, my propensity model, which was actually built in partnership with my followers on Instagram. I put out a survey just saying like, hey, I want to build a recommendation model for you. And I promise you, like, I'll use it in other analysis as well. Just a couple of questions I need you to answer. So people reached out to me through DMs, and the questions were like, okay, do you play Pokemon Go? Like a basic marketing survey I came up with. What was your first game? Do you play the TCG? Ideally, if you could pick your favorite 6 Pokemon, who would go in it, right? So think
Mm-hmm.
about with like sports. You could get to that with questions of like, okay, what are the top 5 cards in your collection?
That's
Oh,
right.
what team do you root for? Oh, where did you grow up in? What's the nearest team to you? Like you
Mm-hmm.
can understand and start predicting the likelihood of other cards of like, would FD pay over the price of this?
That's right.
And like everyone likes to think like, no man, like not you can't get any data on me. I do it for a living. There's several people doing it. Like if you have a Netflix license or, you know, subscribe to Disney Plus and you get the screen that shows like recommendations next, or people like you keep watching this, like there might be some that are off, right? But it already knows just from data it
Yeah.
gathers, like,
Yeah.
okay, this is what you normally watch, right? And you could do that with cards. And I'm all for it as long as it's improving the collecting experience.
Understood.
Like if it leads to like a next best option sale, that that makes it not fun. I don't think so. If it could lead to something where like, hey, you had visibility into what collectors like you collect, and then it's your decision and it doesn't show you a link to an eBay sale,
That's right.
then it's like, hey, that's fun. Like it might show you gaps in your collection you didn't even think about.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're a non-sports collector and say you like to character collect, like there are so many gaps, so many sets you don't even know about. Like you think like, okay, I got the first appearance card or some artwork I really enjoy. And then it's like, man, you just do a Google search or talk to someone else, and it's like you're just at the tip of the
Is
iceberg.
that, isn't that, yeah, yeah. Isn't that the truth? Brendan asked a question here. We know we were going to get into a little bit of shill bidding, but what is the benefit of not using AI instead of a person to correct in real time shill bid or non sales for whatever reason? Wouldn't efficiency be the prime directive?
So, okay, the benefit of not using one, we'll use it by what's the con of using AI.
Mm-hmm.
So, one thing in my profession, and I built models like it before, is called like fraud detection.
Yeah.
If not done correctly, you can identify like a high value behavior that happens and send like a really bad negative experience, right? So like these measurement apps for trading cards, right? You could put some guide rails in it that now I don't know if the question is about like can eBay put something in there or should like our evaluation data. So I'm answering it as the evaluation
Yeah.
platforms.
Yeah.
It's like, you can only include, sales that had X amount of percentage with this type of rating or bids within a certain time. The only issue there too is that eBay has a lot of restrictions on their API. I know because I tried to get it because I was like, hey, this would be really fun if I can just do API calls to eBay and figure it out. Little did I know that they were releasing Terapeak to the world, which is great. It turns us all into citizen data scientists,
Yeah.
which eventually, like, hey, that's the goal, right? You trained up somebody so well. But where AI can fail is just it's going to misidentify things and then use that to correct itself later on. It's never going to correct itself. Now, using a real person, right, there's going to be biases in there. Like everyone has it. And that's what makes it like really interesting from I can look at a data point and tell you something different. You can look at a data point, tell you something different.
Yes.
Who's wrong, who's right is really about like how you articulate it, unfortunately.
True. Very true. Because I know I've had some jobs in the past where I'm looking at data and I could tell you the story that I want to tell you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
No matter what the data is.
Every loss is an opportunity.
That's true. That's the way it's said. I know we talk about basketball, and there have been some sentiment that modern basketball cards, may not be the market to think long term on because of some base sets or other things being over slabbed, high populations now on cards that are in slabs, maybe even at a PSA 9, PSA 10, compared to vintage. What are some of your thoughts on the breakdown between vintage and modern, and what's some of the future outlook that you see?
Yeah. I mean, my first question would be to answering that, like as someone in analytics, data science, you always want to make sure you're asking like the proper questions.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, let's think about like how much sealed wax is out there too. Like what's like always the biggest like content videos out there? It's like, oh, somebody pulled a 86 Jordan. And in my head, like it's the same thing, this is where Pokemon and sports are a lot alike, is like the biggest content for Pokemon is like, wow, they pulled a first edition Charizard or Shadowless Charizard.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking to myself, how many of these are out there? But I actually have started analyzing basketball cards, because it was nostalgia of myself. I have been picking up some for my son. I like LaMelo. So I've been PCing LaMelo for him. The first NBA draft my wife ever watched, I got her into. It's a little background on there about my wife is she's Venezuelan.
Okay.
She's been in the States for about 10 years now, but there's some concepts that are still like LeVar Ball like blew her mind. So it's like, okay, once really had a son who could ball. It's like, oh, we're piecing him. For sure. Like this is like a guy we can get around. Like it was a lot of fun because like say what you want about LeVar Ball, but LeVar Ball is like he loves his kids. Like that shows through. And I love my kids. So
I think
the analysis
he loves his children and he wants something different for them.
Yeah.
Than what he has.
Yeah. So the analysis I've been working on, and it's about vintage and modern, and it's really, can you use modern basketball as incremental comparison to non-sports, right? Because it's thrown out there all the time. And I'm not trying to prove a hypothesis one way or another, but, I'm a human being. And a lot of times in my head, it's always like, should cards, now that non-sports is becoming in the spotlight, is there almost like currency rates? Like, I mean, I love whatever. Like you give me like the highest value Iceman card. I show up with you with that and I value it so high, it's PSA 10. There's no way you're trading me a sports card for that. I'm sorry. As much as I love Marvel, it's just not there yet. Like so when you see like these high sales that come out of a model, it's really about looking at, let me see what was basketball cards doing at the same time. And then being like a high print count really helps that analysis.
Yeah.
Now, I think the base cards being overprinted is a good entry point for, say, my son, right? When he's out of age and he can go through, like, man, I had such a joy when I think I was almost in high school at the time, and I opened a pack of Topps Finest, and I got a base Kobe rookie.
Okay.
At the time, I had no clue about inserts or anything. It wasn't about like valuation, but it was just awesome. It was great. Like I went to that draft in person with my family,
Cool.
and at the time of the draft, I had no clue who Kobe was.
Yeah.
All I know is like he was part of the trade.
At all, you had heard maybe McDonald's All-American. So a little something about Philadelphia. That's about it.
And it was a historic draft to go to. Like that was one of the perks of living in Brooklyn. Yeah. Like we just went to, hop over to New Jersey, go and see that. I remember like the applause for Iverson when he hit the stage. And then as Knicks fans, we were going nuts for John Wallace.
Oh, yeah.
And now looking back on it, it's like,
I thought John Wallace was going to be legit, man.
Yeah. So, So I think like looking at from that, pairing it up to the right cards, like you have to ask yourself the question, like, how many people are out there would want, say, like, let's talk about Zion, right? Everyone's just like, okay, agreed upon, overprinted, probably pumped. I still think there's probably more people that would want it. Like if you're a new collector coming in, just right now, if we're just thinking of like right now, it's like I wouldn't want it. But
Zion's hurt.
Yeah,
he's out, and I'm not saying of course like he's not hurt, but he's gotten better.
Yeah, and you can look at
what we see right now. Playoffs are going on. I think a lot of collectors, investors, and flippers, and everybody that's about the hobby are thinking, where's he going to be at when the season starts next year?
Yeah, but I'm going to be a little biased to basketball all the time. Like, play it as well, still do. But I mean, I think people are probably going to put the focus on like what were the really rare inserts. And that's something I'm trying to include into my models is rarity. That was feedback I've gotten anytime I've presented it. Even other ones like, just like the rarity of the card. Is there some way? The struggle with there is there's so many few sales that happen if it's truly rare. But I think like as collectors as a whole, if we think of ourselves as a hive mind, right? Like the more resources out there, like myself, a lot of fun others are getting into the space, like pointing out like transparency issues. But I think eventually they're going to get into more like trending and improving the hobby as well. Like, man, we would have been dangerous in the 90s.
That's right. True. Well, so what are your thoughts now on football? I mean, there are so many different players to think about. The overall football market is when the boom happened, basketball took off. Yeah. Football kind of lagged behind. But what are some of the things that you see for football going forward?
Yeah. So I love that you're following it up with football because I can transition into like something that I don't think gets like articulated well is the seasonal effects of a market.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone always talks about like, hey, off season, in season. No one really is convinced that like, hey, in play matters, but in the data it shows it, right? And you want to kind of time and make sure you're prepared for in season, but don't overthink yourself. Football to me, and this is gonna like, get a couple people agitated probably, but to me it's almost like similar to like non-sports. It's quarterbacks in my mind are nothing else if you're thinking about just valuation only.
Like, now you're absolutely right.
Like you could almost call like Tom Brady value outliers.
Mm-hmm.
If I did an analysis, it's like I have to control for Tom Brady his card prices. And it's, we're talking about like legitimate sales, and it's just because he's household name,
That's
right?
true.
Like,
Because
and
if you compare, a lot of times I'll do a comparison between like a Tom Brady, and let's even say a Ray Lewis, someone that's legendary. The two markets are not the same.